The carburetor wasn't cooperating at midnight, but neither was sleep. I'd been staring at the ceiling for 2 hours before giving up and heading to the garage. At least out here, surrounded by the familiar smell of motor oil and metal, I could pretend the growing distance between Iris and me was just another mechanical problem I could fix. That's when I heard Chloe's voice drifting through the heating vent from her bedroom upstairs. "Mom, you have to delete that picture. Dad's not an idiot." I froze, wrench still in hand. The house had thin walls, a fact that usually annoyed me when Chloe played her music too loud. Tonight, I was grateful for the poor construction. Iris's reply came through crystal clear, her tone cold as January in Maine. "He's not even looking. He'd believe anything I told him." Well, at least I knew where I stood. Right under the bus, apparently. I set down the wrench and wiped my hands on an old rag, my mind racing. What picture? What wasn't I supposed to be seeing? For the past 3 months, Iris had been working late more often, coming home with new jewelry and clothes she claimed were gifts from her sister in Boston. Her law practice was supposedly booming, bringing in clients from Portland and beyond. The sapphire necklace had appeared 2 weeks ago. Iris wore it to the town fundraiser, where half of Riverside, Maine showed up to bid on quilts and casseroles. She'd looked stunning, but something about the way she touched the necklace throughout the evening bothered me, like she was checking to make sure it was still there, still real. "It's from Rebecca," she'd said when I complimented it. "You know how she spoils me." Rebecca, her older sister, worked as a nurse in Boston and sent birthday cards with $20 bills. The idea of her dropping serious money on jewelry seemed about as likely as me winning the lottery, but I'd nodded and smiled. Marriage is built on small lies and large trusts, or so I'd thought. Now, lying in bed an hour later, I couldn't shake Chloe's words. My 17-year-old daughter thought I was oblivious, and apparently, so did my wife. The thing is, I might work with my hands for a living, but I'm not stupid. 39 years of life in a small town teaches you to notice things, to read between the lines. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, something I rarely did. Iris had been posting more lately, carefully curated shots of her morning coffee, her office, inspirational quotes about finding yourself and embracing change. The comments were always the same handful of people: Margo from the boutique, a few other wives from town, and increasingly, Ethan Turner. Ethan Turner. Real estate agent, gym enthusiast, and the kind of guy who wore cologne to the hardware store. He'd moved to Riverside 2 years ago from Portland, bringing with him a leased Tesla and an attitude that screamed, "I'm too good for this place, but I'll tolerate it." I scrolled through his profile, something I'd never done before. Expensive restaurants in Portland, workout selfies, motivational posts about crushing your goals. And then I saw it. A photo from 3 hours ago. The same sapphire necklace I'd admired on my wife, laid out on what looked like expensive sheets. The caption read, "For someone special." The background was unmistakable, a lakeside bedroom with windows I recognized from his previous posts about his weekend retreat. The same retreat Iris had mentioned wanting to visit someday, the one with the view of Sebago Lake that we could never afford on a mechanic's salary. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. The necklace caught the light in the photo exactly the way it had when Iris wore it. The same intricate setting, the same unusual cut of the stone. There was no mistaking it. My hands shook as I screenshot the image. Then I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I texted my wife a photo at 1 a.m. Saw this on Instagram. Funny coincidence about the necklace. The 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, her response came through. "It's just a joke. Don't be so insecure." Insecure. Right. Because noticing your wife's gift from her sister on another man's social media was a character flaw on my part. I set the phone aside and stared at the ceiling again, but sleep was even more impossible now. 15 years of marriage, and I was apparently the last to know it was over. The next morning arrived with the pretense of normalcy. Iris made coffee and toast, humming while she got ready for work. She wore the necklace again, and when she kissed my cheek goodbye, I caught a whiff of perfume I didn't recognize. "Have a good day, honey," she said, the same words she'd used for years, but now they felt like lines from a play where I was the only one who didn't know the script. Chloe barely looked up from her phone as she grabbed a granola bar and headed for the door. "Dad, can you pick me up after school? Mom's working late again." "Sure thing, kiddo." Working late. Of course she was. At the shop, I tried to focus on the transmission rebuild I'd been putting off, but my mind kept wandering. Every time a car door slammed outside, I expected to see Ethan's Tesla pulling up, ready for some kind of confrontation. But Riverside isn't that kind of town, and Ethan wasn't that kind of man. He was the type who preferred his affairs neat and tidy, conducted in the shadows while maintaining his image as a successful businessman and pillar of the community. Around noon, Margo Dean stopped by. She owned the boutique next to the coffee shop and had been Iris's best friend since high school. Margo was the kind of woman who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it, usually under the guise of concern. "Kellan, honey, how are you holding up?" she asked, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Holding up fine, Margo. Why wouldn't I be?" She leaned against my workbench, careful not to get her designer jacket dirty. "Oh, you know how people talk. Iris has been so busy lately, working so hard. Some folks are saying she's really coming into her own, professionally speaking." The way she said professionally made it clear she meant something else entirely. "Iris has always been ambitious," I said, not looking up from the engine I was working on. "I'm proud of her success." "Of course you are. You're such a supportive husband. Not every man would be so understanding about his wife's new friendships." There it was. The knife slipped between my ribs with surgical precision. Margo was testing me, seeing how much I knew, how much I was willing to admit. "Iris makes friends easily," I said. "Always has." "Oh yes, she certainly does. That Ethan Turner, for instance. Such a charming man. He's been helping her with some real estate investments, you know. Very generous with his time and expertise." I finally looked up at her, and she had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable under my stare. "I'm sure he is." That evening, Iris came home at 9:30, claiming she'd grabbed dinner with a client. She was wearing different earrings than she'd had on that morning, and her lipstick had been reapplied recently. The necklace was still there, catching the kitchen light as she moved. "How was your day?" she asked, the question automatic. "Fine. Margo stopped by the shop." Something flickered in her eyes. "Oh? What did she want?" "Just chatting. Mentioned you've been making new friends." Iris busied herself with putting away her purse, her movements suddenly careful and deliberate. "You know how Margo exaggerates. She sees romance everywhere." "Is that what she sees?" "Kellan." She turned to face me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd married, but it was gone quickly, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "You're being paranoid. I've been working hard, building my practice. I'm sorry if that means less time at home, but I thought you'd be happy about the extra income." "I am happy. I just wonder where the necklace really came from." "I told you. Rebecca gave it to me." "Right. Rebecca." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot from Ethan's Instagram. Funny how it ended up on social media. Her face went pale, then flushed red. For a moment, I thought she might tell me the truth. Instead, she laughed, a sound that didn't reach her eyes. "This is ridiculous. It's obviously not the same necklace. Do you think there's only one sapphire necklace in the world? You're seeing what you want to see, Kellan. Maybe you should ask yourself why you're looking for reasons not to trust me." And there it was. Somehow, my discovery of her affair had become my character flaw, my paranoia, my insecurity. "You're right," I said, putting the phone away. "I'm sorry." She smiled then, the same smile she'd given me when we were dating, when I thought I was the luckiest guy in Maine. "It's okay, honey. I know you've been stressed about the shop. Why don't you take a hot shower? I'll make us some tea." I went upstairs, but instead of heading to the bathroom, I stopped outside Chloe's room. Her door was cracked, and I could hear her on the phone with one of her friends. "I know, right? Dad's being so weird lately. Mom says he's going through something like a midlife crisis or whatever. It's so embarrassing." A midlife crisis. That's how they'd decided to frame it. The paranoid husband, the supportive wife, the understanding daughter. I was being written out of my own life story, reduced to a character who couldn't see what was right in front of him, but I could see. I was finally starting to see everything. Over the next week, I started paying attention in ways I never had before. Not because I wanted to catch Iris in lies, but because I needed to understand the scope of what I was dealing with. If my marriage was over, I wanted to know why and how, not just stumble around in the dark while everyone else held flashlights. I started with the small things. Iris claimed to be working late Tuesday, but her location on our shared family plan showed her phone at the lakeside area where Ethan's retreat was located. Wednesday, she said she had a client dinner in Portland, but her credit card statement showed no restaurant charges. Instead, there was a charge at a lingerie boutique I'd never heard of. The necklace appeared in 2 more of Ethan's posts that week. Once draped over a wine glass at what looked like the same lake house, and once in a mirror selfie where it was clearly being worn by someone just outside the frame. Someone with the same shade of auburn hair as my wife. I started screenshotting everything, not because I was planning to confront anyone, but because I was beginning to doubt my own memory. Iris had a way of making me question what I'd seen, what I'd heard, what I knew to be true. Having evidence felt like holding on to my sanity. The breaking point came Friday afternoon. I was under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's Buick when my phone buzzed with a notification from our joint banking account. A withdrawal for $800 made at an ATM in Portland. Iris was supposed to be in court all day in Riverside. I called her office, and her secretary, Janet, answered on the second ring. "Oh, hi, Kellan. Iris isn't in today. She said she had depositions in Portland all day. Should be back Monday." Depositions, not court, and definitely not in Riverside. I thanked Janet and hung up, then sat in my truck for a long time, staring at the phone. $800 was a lot of money for us. It was groceries for a month, or the electric bill, or the payment on Chloe's car insurance. It wasn't the kind of money Iris would withdraw without mentioning it. That evening, she came home with shopping bags from stores I recognized as expensive. When I asked about her day, she launched into a detailed story about a difficult deposition and a client who kept changing his testimony. She was a good storyteller, always had been, but now I was listening for the details that didn't quite fit, the places where the narrative felt rehearsed. "Sounds exhausting," I said when she finished. It was, but worth it. This case could really put the firm on the map. "What kind of case is it?" She paused, just for a moment, but I caught it. "Real estate dispute, very complicated, lots of moving parts." Real estate, of course. That night, after she'd gone to sleep, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I went through her purse. I found the receipt from the lingerie store, along with a receipt from a restaurant in Portland that served the kind of food that cost more than I made in a day. But what really caught my attention was a business card tucked behind her credit cards. Ethan Turner, with a handwritten note on the back. "Can't wait for tomorrow. You know where to find me." Tomorrow was Saturday. Iris had told me she was driving to Boston to visit Rebecca. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it and went to bed, but sleep was impossible. I lay there listening to my wife breathe beside me, wondering how long this had been going on, wondering how many lies I'd believed, wondering what else I didn't know. At 3 in the morning, I got up and went to the computer in our home office. I pulled up our joint credit card statements and started scrolling back through the months, looking for patterns I'd missed. What I found was a trail of deception going back almost 6 months. Restaurant charges on days when Iris claimed to be working through lunch. Hotel charges in Portland when she said she was staying late at the office. ATM withdrawals that corresponded with Ethan's social media posts from expensive locations. But the thing that really got to me was the life insurance policy. I found the paperwork in a folder marked Important Documents, filed between our mortgage papers and Chloe's birth certificate. It was a new policy, taken out 3 months ago, with me as the insured and Iris as the sole beneficiary. The coverage amount made my hands shake. $500,000. I'd never signed any life insurance paperwork. I was sure of that. But there was my signature at the bottom, or something that looked like my signature. Close enough to pass a casual inspection, but not quite right to someone who'd been signing their own name for 39 years. I sat back in the desk chair and stared at the document. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was something else entirely, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Iris wanted me gone, not just out of her life, but gone completely. And she was willing to forge documents to make it happen. The question was, what was I going to do about it? Saturday morning, Iris left for Boston with a suitcase and promises to give Rebecca my love. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then got in my truck and drove to the Rusty Anchor, the kind of bar that opened early and asked no questions. Mac McIntyre was behind the bar, wiping down glasses with the methodical precision of a man who'd been doing the same job for 20 years. Mac was an ex-cop who'd retired to Riverside after a career in Portland, bringing with him a world-weary wisdom and an ability to listen without judgment. "Little early for you, isn't it, Kellan?" he asked as I took a seat at the bar. "Little late, actually. I've been up all night." He poured me a coffee without asking and set it down in front of me. "Woman troubles? That obvious? You've got the look, seen it plenty of times. What's going on?" I told him everything. The necklace, the Instagram posts, the forged insurance policy, the money, the lies. Mac listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, polishing the same glass over and over. "That's a hell of a thing," he said finally. "What are you planning to do about it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to confront her, lay it all out and see what she says. But I'm pretty sure I know what she'll say. That I'm paranoid, that I'm seeing things that aren't there, that I need help." "And the other part?" "The other part wants to disappear. Pack a bag and drive until I run out of road." Mac set down the glass and leaned against the bar. "Can I give you some advice? That's why I'm here. Don't do either of those things. Not yet. You want to fight back? Start thinking like a lawyer, not a mechanic. Document everything. Get proof that can't be dismissed or explained away, and find out who else is involved, because something like this doesn't happen in a vacuum." "What do you mean?" "I mean your wife didn't wake up one morning and decide to have an affair and forge insurance documents. Someone's been whispering in her ear, helping her plan this. You need to figure out who." As if summoned by our conversation, the door chimed and Margo Dean walked in. She spotted me immediately and made her way over, her expression carefully neutral. "Kellan, what a surprise! I didn't expect to see you here so early." "Margo." I nodded politely. "Just grabbing some coffee." "Of course." She glanced at Mac, who had moved to the other end of the bar to give us privacy. "I heard Iris went to visit Rebecca today. Such a shame you couldn't go with her. Shop doesn't run itself." "No, I suppose it doesn't. You work so hard, Kellan. Sometimes I wonder if Iris appreciates everything you do for her and Chloe." There was something in her tone, a fishing quality that reminded me of our conversation at the shop. Margo was probing, testing my reactions, gathering information. But why? "She appreciates it," I said carefully. "I'm sure she does. Though between you and me, I worry about her sometimes. She's been so different lately, more secretive, like she's carrying some kind of burden. Different how? Margo leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Well, I probably shouldn't say anything, but she's been asking a lot of questions about you lately. Your habits, your schedule, your state of mind. My coffee suddenly tasted like ash. What kind of questions? Oh, you know, whether you've been acting strangely, if you've seemed depressed or angry. She's worried about you, Kellan. We all are. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Margo wasn't just Iris's friend and confidant. She was helping to build a narrative, establishing a pattern of behavior that would support whatever story they were planning to tell. That's very considerate of her, I managed. She loves you, you know, even if things have been difficult between you lately. Have they been difficult? I hadn't noticed. Margo's smile faltered slightly. Well, marriage is hard work, especially when people grow in different directions. Sometimes the kindest thing is to recognize when it's time to let go. Let go of what? Of expectations that no longer serve anyone. Of situations that have become unhealthy. She was telling me to give up, to walk away quietly and make it easy for everyone. The problem was, I was beginning to understand that walking away might not be an option they were willing to give me. I should get going, I said, standing up and leaving money on the bar. Thanks for the coffee, Mac. Anytime, Kellan. You know where to find me if you need to talk. Outside, I sat in my truck for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Margo hadn't just stumbled into the rusty anchor by accident. She'd been looking for me, checking to see what I knew, how I was handling the situation. But there was something else, something that had been nagging at me since our conversation at the shop. Margo had mentioned Ethan helping Iris with real estate investments. That seemed like an odd thing for a small-town boutique owner to know, unless she was more involved than she'd let on. I drove home and spent the rest of the day going through old photos and documents, looking for connections I'd missed. What I found was a pattern of Margo's involvement in our lives that went back years. She'd been there when Iris decided to go back to school for her law degree. She'd been there when Iris started her own practice. She'd been there for every major decision, every turning point, every moment when Iris had chosen ambition over family. And now, she was here for this. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the diner on Route 2 at 8 tonight. I have information you need. Come alone. I stared at the message for a long time, debating whether it was a trap or an opportunity. Finally, I decided it didn't matter. I was already trapped. The question was whether I was going to fight my way out or wait for the walls to close in. At 8 o'clock, I drove to the diner. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few truckers nursing coffee and a waitress who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I spotted my contact immediately, a woman in her 40s, well-dressed but nervous, sitting in a corner booth with her back to the wall. I'd never seen her before, but something about her seemed familiar. She had the kind of face you might pass on the street without noticing, unremarkable in a way that seemed deliberate. "Mr. Brooks?" she asked as I approached. "That's me. Please, sit down. I'm Linda Turner." Turner. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. "You're related to Ethan?" "I'm his wife." I sat down heavily, my mind reeling. Ethan was married. Of course he was married. Men like him always were. "I'm sorry," I said. "I had no idea." Most people don't. Ethan keeps his personal life very private, especially here in Maine. We live in Portland, and I rarely come up to Riverside. The waitress appeared with coffee I didn't remember ordering. Linda waited until she was gone before continuing. "I found out about the affair 3 weeks ago. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, jewelry purchases, the same way you probably found out." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's not just an affair, Mr. Brooks. They're planning something, and I think you're in danger." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across the table. Inside were photographs, documents, and what looked like printed emails. "I hired a private investigator," she explained. "I wanted evidence for the divorce. But what we found was much worse than I expected." The first photograph showed Iris and Ethan at a restaurant in Portland, their heads close together over what looked like legal documents. The second showed them at a bank, signing papers. The third was taken through a window at Ethan's lake house, showing them in an intimate embrace while wearing the sapphire necklace. But it was the documents that made my hands shake. Bank account applications in Iris's name. Insurance claim forms, pre-filled but not yet submitted. And most disturbing of all, a series of emails between Iris and someone identified only as M, discussing the plan and taking care of the K problem. "M is Margo Dean," Linda said, watching my face. "My investigator confirmed it. She's been helping them from the beginning." "Helping them do what?" "I think you know." I did know, but I needed to hear it said out loud. "They want me gone." The insurance policy was just the beginning. They've been building a case for months, establishing a pattern of erratic behavior, depression, financial stress. Margot's been spreading rumors around town about your mental state, your marriage problems, your drinking. I don't drink. I know. But perception is reality, especially in a small town. They're creating a narrative where your disappearance would seem logical, tragic, but not surprising. I felt sick. "How long have you known?" "About the affair? 3 weeks? About the rest of it? I put it together after my investigator showed me the emails. That's when I decided to contact you." "Why? Why risk getting involved?" Linda was quiet for a moment, staring into her coffee cup. When she looked up, her eyes were hard. "Because I loved my husband once, and because no one deserves what they're planning to do to you, but mostly because I want to watch them burn." She reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. "I can't go to the police. The evidence was obtained illegally and without more concrete proof of intent. It's just speculation. But you can use it. You can protect yourself." "How?" "By being smarter than they are, by staying ahead of their plan, and by making sure that when this all comes out, you're not the one who looks crazy." I spent another hour at the diner going through the evidence Linda had gathered. It painted a picture of a conspiracy that went back months, with Margo as the architect and Ethan as the willing accomplice. Iris wasn't just having an affair, she was being manipulated into something much darker. When I finally left the diner, I had a plan of my own. Sunday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Iris was still in Boston, or pretending to be, and Chloe was at a friend's house. I had the day to myself and a list of things that needed to be done. First, I drove to the bank and withdrew half of our joint savings, exactly what I was legally entitled to. Then I went to the phone store and added a second line to our account, getting myself a phone that Iris didn't know about. Finally, I stopped at an electronics store and bought a small recording device and a GPS tracker. The tracker went under Iris's car, hidden in the wheel well where she'd never think to look. The recorder went into my pocket, ready for the right moment. Iris came home Sunday evening full of stories about Rebecca and her new apartment, bringing with her a bag of expensive chocolates that she claimed were a gift from her sister. I listened and nodded and played the part of the loving husband, but inside I was calculating, planning, waiting. Monday morning, after Iris left for work, I used my new phone to call her office. "Hi, Janet. It's Kellan. I'm planning a surprise for Iris, and I wanted to make sure I didn't interfere with her schedule. What time is her client meeting today?" "Oh, she doesn't have any client meetings today, Kellan. She blocked out the whole day for paperwork and research. Said she didn't want to be disturbed." "Perfect. Thanks, Janet." I hung up and checked the GPS tracker. Iris's car was at the lake house. That afternoon, I drove out to Ethan's retreat. I didn't plan to confront them or cause a scene. I just wanted to see for myself, to confirm what I already knew. The Tesla was parked next to Iris's Honda in the driveway, and through the large windows facing the lake, I could see two figures moving around inside. I took photos with my new phone, time-stamped and geotagged. Then I drove home and waited. Iris came home at 6:30, claiming she'd had a productive day at the office. She was wearing the sapphire necklace again, and when she kissed me hello, I could smell Ethan's cologne on her skin. "How was your day?" she asked. "Quiet. Fixed Mrs. Patterson's transmission, did some paperwork. Nothing exciting." "That's nice, honey." We had dinner together, making small talk about Chloe's grades and the weather and the new restaurant that was opening downtown. It was almost like old times, except for the lies hanging in the air between us like smoke. After dinner, while Iris was in the shower, I went through her purse again. This time I found something new. A key I didn't recognize, attached to a keychain with Ethan's initials. I photographed it, then put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Tuesday, I called in sick to work and followed Iris. She went to her office first, staying just long enough to maintain appearances, then drove to the lake house. I watched from a distance as she let herself in with the key, confirming what I already suspected. But I wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. I was preparing for war. That evening, Margo stopped by the house, ostensibly to return a book she'd borrowed from Iris, but I could see her taking in details. The way I looked, how I was acting, whether I seemed suspicious or unstable. "You look tired, Kellan," she said with false concern. "Are you sleeping okay?" "Fine," I said. "Just busy at the shop." "You should take better care of yourself. Iris worries about you." "Does she?" "Of course she does, we all do. You've seemed so different lately, distant." There it was again, the narrative building, the foundation being laid for whatever story they planned to tell. But I was ready for it now. "I've been thinking a lot," I said, "about life, about choices, about what really matters." Margot's eyes sharpened with interest. "What kind of thoughts?" "Just wondering if I've been living the life I was meant to live, you know? Whether I've been true to myself or just going through the motions." "That's very philosophical of you." "Maybe it's time for some changes. Big changes." I could see her processing this, filing it away to report back to Iris and Ethan. The unstable husband, having a breakdown, talking about making drastic changes. It fit perfectly with their narrative. But what they didn't know was that I was writing a narrative of my own. Wednesday morning, I made my move. While Iris was at the lake house and Chloe was at school, I drove to the jewelry store where Ethan had bought the necklace. The owner, Mr. Goldstein, had known me for years and was happy to chat. "That Turner fellow, he's a regular customer," he said when I showed him the photo from Instagram. "Comes in every few months, always buying jewelry for different women. This necklace was one of his more expensive purchases." "Different women?" "Oh yes, never the same one twice. He's quite the charmer, that one." I asked Mr. Goldstein if he'd be willing to make a statement about the necklace's origin, and he agreed. It wasn't much, but it was one more piece of truth in a web of lies. That afternoon, I got a call from Linda Turner. "They're accelerating the timeline," she said without preamble. "My investigator intercepted some communications. Something's going to happen this weekend." "What kind of something?" "I don't know exactly. But Ethan cleared his schedule, and Margot's been asking questions around town about your mental state, your drinking habits, whether anyone's seen you acting erratically." My grip tightened on the phone. "This weekend is Chloe's camping trip with her friends." "That's probably not a coincidence." "No, it probably wasn't. With Chloe safely out of town, there would be no witnesses, no complications. Just a troubled husband who'd finally reached his breaking point." "What do you think I should do?" "Disappear," Linda said immediately. "Get out of town, go somewhere public where you can establish an alibi. Don't be alone, Don't be predictable, and whatever you do, don't confront them directly. But I had a different idea. I was tired of running, tired of being the victim in someone else's story. It was time to flip the script. "Linda," I said, "how would you like to help me destroy them?" Friday evening, Chloe left for her camping trip with her friends, her car loaded with enough supplies for a week in the wilderness. She hugged me goodbye, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the little girl she used to be. "Love you, Dad," she said. "Love you too, kiddo. Be safe." After she left, the house felt different. Emptier, but also charged with possibility. Iris was working late again, or pretending to, and I had the evening to make my final preparations. I called Mac at the Rusty Anchor. "I need a favor," I told him. "Name it." "Tomorrow night, I need you to remember that I was at your bar from 8 until closing. Drunk, depressed, talking about my failing marriage. Can you do that?" There was a pause. "Kellan, what are you planning?" "Justice." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I've got." Another pause. Longer this time. "Will anyone get hurt?" "Only the people who deserve it." "All right. But you owe me the whole story afterward." "Deal." Next, I called Linda Turner and confirmed our plan. She would be in Riverside tomorrow, staying at the bed and breakfast on Main Street. At exactly 9 o'clock, she would receive a call from me, and we would have a very public, very loud argument about her husband's affair with my wife. The kind of argument that would bring the innkeeper running and create witnesses. Finally, I set up the recording device in the living room, hidden behind a picture frame where it would capture everything that happened in the room. Then I sat down to wait. Iris came home at 11, full of apologies about the late night and promises that things would calm down soon. She was nervous, I could tell, her movements too quick and her smile too bright. She kept touching the necklace, that unconscious gesture I'd noticed before. "Chloe get off okay?" she asked. "Yeah, she's excited about the trip." "Good, she needs some time with her friends." We went to bed, lying side by side in the darkness like strangers. I could feel the tension radiating off her, could hear her breathing change as she tried to fall asleep. Eventually, she succeeded, but I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle around us. Tomorrow would change everything. Saturday dawned gray and overcast, the kind of Maine morning that promises rain before evening. Iris was up early, making coffee and checking her phone constantly. She'd dressed carefully in jeans and a sweater, casual but expensive, the necklace glinting at her throat. "I'm meeting Margo for lunch," she said. "Then I thought I might do some shopping in Portland." "Sounds nice." "What about you? Any plans?" "Thought I might work on the truck, maybe catch up on some paperwork." She nodded, but I could see her calculating, wondering if I suspected anything, if I was going to be a problem. After she left, I spent the day in a strange state of calm. I cleaned the house, did some laundry, fixed a leaky faucet I'd been meaning to get to for months. Normal domestic tasks that felt surreal given what was coming. At 6 o'clock, I got a text from Linda. "They're all at the lake house, Iris, Ethan, and Margo. It looks like they're having some kind of meeting." At 7, another text. "Iris just left. She's heading home." I turned on the recording device and waited. Iris arrived at 7:30, but she wasn't alone. I heard car doors slamming in the driveway, multiple voices, footsteps on the front porch. When the door opened, Iris walked in, followed by Ethan and Margo. "Kellan," Iris called out. "We need to talk." I came into the living room, making sure to position myself where the hidden recorder would pick up everything clearly. "This is unexpected," I said. Ethan stepped forward, his chest puffed out like a rooster in a henhouse. "We think it's time to clear the air." "About what?" "About your behavior lately," Margo said. "Your paranoia, your accusations, your drinking." "I don't drink." "Everyone in town knows you've been spending time at the Rusty Anchor," Iris said. "Mac's worried about you. We all are." It was masterfully done, I had to admit. They'd positioned themselves as the concerned parties, the ones trying to help a man who was clearly falling apart. If I reacted with anger or denial, it would only support their narrative. "I appreciate your concern," I said calmly. "But I'm fine." "No, you're not," Ethan said. "You've been following Iris, taking pictures, making wild accusations about our friendship. Is that what you call it? Friendship?" Iris stepped closer, and I could see tears in her eyes. Real tears, which surprised me. "Kellan, I know this is hard. I know you're hurting, but you have to accept that our marriage is over. We've grown apart, and trying to hold on is only making things worse." "For who?" "For everyone. For you, for me, for Chloe. She's embarrassed by your behavior, afraid of what you might do next." That stung, because it might have been true. But I stayed focused on the bigger picture. "What exactly do you think I might do?" The three of them exchanged glances, a silent communication that confirmed what I already knew. "We're worried you might hurt yourself," Margo said gently. "Or someone else. The insurance policy suggests you've been thinking about permanent solutions," Ethan added. There it was, the setup, delivered with practiced precision. They were establishing my suicidal ideation, my potential for violence, my deteriorating mental state, all recorded for posterity. "I never signed any insurance policy," I said. "Kellan, we have your signature," Iris said. "You signed it 3 months ago." "No, I didn't." "This is exactly what we're talking about," Margo said. "The paranoia, the denial of reality. You need help." I looked at my wife, this woman I'd loved for 15 years, and saw a stranger. Whatever we'd had was gone, had been gone for months, maybe years. But this wasn't about love anymore. This was about survival. "You're right," I said. "I do need help." They relaxed slightly, thinking I was capitulating. "The first step is admitting there's a problem," Iris said. "Oh, there's definitely a problem," I agreed. "The problem is that you forged my signature on an insurance policy. You've been having an affair for months, and the three of you are trying to gaslight me into believing I'm crazy." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "That's not true," Iris said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Which part? The affair or the insurance fraud?" Ethan stepped forward aggressively. "You need to be very careful about the accusations you make." "Or what? You'll make me disappear?" "Nobody's making anyone disappear," Margo said quickly. "We're trying to help you. By spreading rumors about my mental health, by forging legal documents, by planning my convenient suicide." I could see them realizing that I knew more than they'd thought, that their carefully constructed plan was falling apart. "You're being ridiculous," Iris said, but she was backing toward the door. "Am I?" "Let me tell you what's ridiculous. What's ridiculous is thinking you could pull this off in a town where everyone knows everyone. What's ridiculous is believing I wouldn't notice my wife wearing jewelry bought by her lover. What's ridiculous is forging someone's signature when you don't know how to do it properly." I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I'd taken, the evidence I'd gathered, the timeline I'd constructed. "What's really ridiculous is thinking I'd go quietly." The room erupted. Ethan lunged toward me, but I stepped aside and he crashed into the coffee table. Margo was shouting something about lawsuits and slander. Iris was crying, real tears this time, the kind that came from watching your world collapse. "It's over," I said, loud enough to be heard over the chaos. "All of it. The affair, the conspiracy, the lies. I have evidence of everything, and copies are already in safe hands." "What do you want?" Iris asked. "I want you out of my house. I want a divorce, and I want all three of you to stay away from me and my daughter." "You can't prove anything," Ethan said, but he was bleeding from a cut on his forehead where he'd hit the table. "Watch me." They left then, defeated and desperate, their grand plan in ruins. I watched through the window as they stood in the driveway, arguing in hushed voices before finally getting in their cars and driving away. Then I sat down in my living room, turned off the recording device, and called Linda Turner. "It's done," I said. "How do you feel?" I thought about that for a moment. How did I feel? Sad, certainly. Angry, definitely. But also something else, something I hadn't felt in months. "Free," I said finally. "I feel free." The necklace was still on the coffee table where Iris had left it, the sapphire catching the lamplight. I picked it up, feeling its weight, remembering all the lies it represented. Then I walked outside and threw it as far as I could into the darkness. Some gifts aren't worth keeping,